Hello, Alan.
Hey,
My machine just went absolutely nuts.
oh, well, that happens. Yeah.
Yeah, it does. It does. Okay. I was going to show Fabian why. What is this? I'm not connected to the internet. I'm talking to Alan online. I'm on the internet. Silly computer. Yeah, I was just trying to do a silly script. Okay, almost back to where I should be. Vision Pro, yeah. Yeah, I may have to fly over to pick one up.
Absolutely.
Reading your messages here.
If that doesn't work out, I'm happy to mail it over to you.
Partly used, you mean?
I wouldn't. I wouldn't. As tempting as that might be, I I know that it's one of those things that just unboxing it isn't going to, at least the way I'm constructed, isn't going to blow my mind. It's going to be using it in the real. Did you see the headset though that's specifically for reading?
I saw something, and that it did look interesting. Where was that on Twitter?
TechCrunch, I think.
Yeah, is it Wired or TechCrunch or whoever saying, "Oh, it's not going to be killer app, it's not going to be special." It's just you always sell a newspaper or whatever it might be with the heading "New stuff, not good." Not new stuff, not good as they promised.
Speaking of newspapers, it occurred to me that, depending on your definition, newspapers is spatial computing,
Yes.
right? Like that feeling, it's kind of gone away now, but it was such an obvious feeling to have the paper open, right? And scanning, and you can kind of get an intuition, sort of GeoGuessr like, of where the news is going to be, and you can very quickly jump from article to article to get a almost an overview effect sense of what is the news, how does this all kind of relate. And it's I'd be interested to see if there are studies on the subconscious comprehension from opening up a newspaper and um, not only getting information from what the articles are, but I think probably getting more useful, intuitive information from what the articles aren't, right? Like if all the articles are relating to tension and war in Ukraine and Germany or whatever, right? You get a sense of like, this is rough, you know?
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah, I think there's a really interesting point and equally strong counterpoint. Oh, it's supposed to be raining in a few minutes. That's okay. I'm in an umbrella. I remember when the Indian Ocean tsunami happened on Boxing Day, the Boxing Day tsunami. And I didn't really care because I saw it only on the web, and it was the web
This
page.
meeting is being recorded.
Hi, Fabian. Alan was just talking about spatial, the newspaper is kind of a spatial computing thing, and I very much agree in the sense of how much we get from layouts. But it's also saying I saw the story of the Boxing Day tsunami, and I only saw it on the web, and I had no real, it didn't really frighten me. You know, it was just some text on a page, and it was a bit bigger than before. It wasn't until much later that I realized how absolutely horrible the situation was. So what they did try to do didn't change. Right, Fabian, I'm going to try to show you now. This will be real quick. This is just a moan. So, guys, I'm trying to do a thing of on my iPhone or my Mac, speak to Siri, show pictures from my current location. That's it. So Apple has this Shortcuts app, which is really quite clever. You drag things around, visual computing, whatever you want to call it. So I do the get current location, and I can, choose things, and it does actually work. I have now chosen to get the address. I've gone through many things. So then I have a filter here to find pictures. I'll just delete it and show you again. So I go media, find photos, drag it over, and then I run it. Then it shows me where I am. It does absolutely nothing with pictures. And that's why I don't program.
There's you should be able to have an and function that's in there. Go to scripting.
Scripting, okay.
Repeat each, wait, get batteries. Okay, no, none of those. Go to all actions, maybe. There should be a do this and then do that, right?
But it does send it from here to there because it's all blue and happy. Like if I click reveal now, it shows where it gets it from. So this bit here actually does get it. I've tried various filters for show only pictures as opposed to other things, but when it did work, it showed random screenshots sent by somebody in Australia.
So there's my guess is, and then I'll follow this up with a suggestion. My guess is what you need to do is first like create a variable, right? And then you're going to request get address from current location, and that current location, then you say, that's going to be your variable, right? Then as the second action, say use this variable, which has now been filled, and use it to open up the use it as a search prompt in your photos, right? Now I'm betting there's probably a shortcut recipe book out there, right? That has a bunch of really fun, convenient shortcuts, not just the ones that are packaged in here.
I've looked at that. Sorry, there's a storm warning. I have to go inside.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Adam, I saw you just showed up. Have you used the scripting Mac app since you're a Mac developer? I'm just trying to get it to do a simple thing of showing pictures taken at current location. And it just doesn't seem to want to do it. Anyway, sorry guys, running inside. I don't know if you can hear the thunder. It was promised yesterday and finally it's here. Very hot here today. Oh yeah, you're flying. How exciting, huh?
Hey all. Good to see you.
You like the drone shots? Okay, all right, inside. By the way, anyone else having a heat wave?
Just a bad airwave.
Oh yeah, you have that.
It's 30, 31 degrees, I think, in Brussels now. So for Brussels, that's pretty hot.
That is wow. Sorry, you're going to the big monitor now. Okay, I'm so sorry about that. Everyone still there?
You can do that in multiple levels.
Mm-hmm.
Still there. So I'm going to argue a little bit. If the first thing you do when you start programming and it does exactly what you think it should do, and you give up, yes, you should stop.
I've tried many things, and we're not going to spend more than a few minutes on it, but I think it's kind of illustrative of, when you program properly, you have more control, no question.
No. It's just, sorry, it's your methodology that is completely wrong. Like, first thing, it should be simple. Why? Where does that come from? Yeah, sure, it should, and everybody should be nice to each other, but yeah, that's not life. That's not programming. It should be simple. No. And then, like, without, I don't want to be too provocative, but like the habit is you need feedback. If it, the worst thing, it's a little bit like going to the casino and betting. The worst thing is if you win, because then you're going to come back. So I think one of the worst thing of programming, if it just works, because then you don't know why. Like, oh, it works, okay. Whereas if it doesn't, then you get in the habit of what is the error message, or worst, I don't have an error message. How? Why would I not? So for example, what Alan was suggesting before is like, oh, having a variable, and then what you can do if you have this is what you actually started to do, meaning to inspect that variable. So address, does it actually have the right address in there? Yes.
It does.
yes.
I've tested that.
So we can give suggestions on what to do, but honestly, the how to do it, and especially why, for example, we bother with printing, debugging messages and all that, in my opinion, that's way more worthwhile, because you don't want to get used to the Apple tool. It's more the principles behind it. And basically one of the principles of like always getting an error message and always being able from that to learn and to fix, because it's going to happen all the time. Like it never works. Like for us, also professional programmers, it never works. Like it's 99% of the time not working, and when it does, it's not performant, and when it doesn't work, when it does work and it is performant, then there were some like weird side effects and whatnot. So most of the time it doesn't work, and that's, let's say, it's part of the charm. I think you need to embrace it.
So what I did when I tinkered with shortcuts a few years ago is I would sort of reverse, and this is also a programming methodology, right? You see what shortcuts are already out there and you kind of reverse engineer them, right? So that suggestion I said about you should be able to do this and that, I don't know if it still works that way, but I remember that from the old ones, right? So you kind of like, you see how you take one that's already put together that may be kind of sophisticated, you break it open, which is a great part about shortcuts, is that you can import one, you can try it out, it works, and you can go see what their ingredients were, and then that gives you kind of a head start on how to set it up yourself, right? So in those, you typically see something like variable or if this and that. But yeah, Fabian's right. Unfortunately, it is the way. You kind of have to. There's nothing wrong with obviously asking for help and everything, but it's always going to involve, failing, digging, searching around, reverse engineering, right? I just found this that may have some help, but it's Siri shortcuts for iPhone photography. If there's any multi-step example in there, that's like, God, I hate all these modals.
I've seen all kinds of things on how to find where a photograph was taken, but it seems like such an odd oversight, because it's easy to say, directions home, boom, it does it. It knows a lot of useful things, but wouldn't it be neat if you're in a restaurant, let's say you've been before with friends, and just say, show me pictures that I've taken at this location, and there it is? I have done quite a bit of Googling on this, and there's no Googling to be found.
So if you go back to your example, it was brief, but what I think is an assumption is when you say filter by address or filter by something, I think you need to find the equivalent in the photo. Because, for example, you can say filter by date, and then you give it, like, I don't know, the temperature of the day. They are both numbers, but they don't actually mean the same thing. So in the example you shown, I think you say filter by address, but then there I did not see any, for example, like GPS coordinate or location, something like this equivalent for it.
I'll puff around with this, but anyway, I didn't want to waste too much time. I just wanted to show it what I thought was a simple thing that isn't that simple.
On the link that you sent about a vision for education, there's there's a topic I'd like to bring up about that at some point, or encourage y'all to watch.
Yeah, I'd love to discuss something inspired by that. Hang on, just really quickly. Just there's something. So don't worry about reading it. This is me trying to get help from Apple. So that's all. You know, there's an email and stuff below talking about this, that, and the other. But on the bottom, I first put in some videos of current stuff so they can see it's real. And here's the thing I want to show you guys. So the stuff that we did before, I took screenshots and put it in, everything you see at the bottom of the screen. I really think we can do more, even in that environment. So what I've done above here, the blue ones, that's using Apple's current style, just to tell them, you know, we can do this and that view, and then we can have another volume. I just, the thing that we've been trying to do for so long is to have our thoughts down before Apple defines these things, but now they have defined it, we might as well use it, right? In some of our discussions. You know, their language of volume and spaces and window.
Honestly, I'm a little bit, as per usual, I guess, worried about this in the sense that I would happily talk about it after I've worked or even played with it for, let's say, half an hour or even a minute, actually. But without having been able to use it, I'd rather not, to be honest, because it's going to be a lot of speculations and assumptions that probably some of it are going to be right, mostly a lot will be wrong, and without, again, that's why I ordered a bunch of gadgets, like that's my life, but I don't get excited before I have the thing, because otherwise, yeah, I don't spend the time actually building things. I just speculate. So to be honest, I personally, as soon as we do, most of us, ideally had one experience with it. Let's go crazy. But before this, it's a little bit tricky, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I absolutely accept that. I don't think we should be bound by it. But you know, when I develop software, and I'm sure it's the same for the rest of you guys, try to make it as invisible as possible in terms of make it as similar to the interfaces of everything else on the platform. So that's why I think it's an interesting exercise. But anyway, Alan had a much more interesting angle coming up.
It's a here, I'll throw in the link. There we go.
Hi guys, sorry I'm late. I was just sending out my paper with my reactions to the Apple Vision Pro to Frode. It should be in his inbox any second.
Yes.
Right. So here's the link. This is Geoffrey Hinton speaking at a pretty high level, Cambridge, about well, it's interesting. It's about, you know, his work with AI. Obviously, he's pretty much the godfather of deep learning, machine learning, then back propagation. And he's talking about how, you know, he's had this way of thinking for 50 years that the more machines can work like brains, the better they'll be, right? So neurons, etc., right? And in the last few months, he's reversed his thinking, and that's why he quit Google, and why he's, you know, going around on this circuit. So that's interesting on its own. Where it's interesting, where it's wild, is his, which is, God, he's so smart. He talks about a central tenet of computer science, that being the separation of hardware and software, and that's what's needed, and it's always been there, you know, because if you want software to work on, you know, different devices, that's the only way you can do it, is by separating them. But by doing that, you can't take advantage of the natural elements of the hardware, right? So what he's suggesting at the beginning, at least, is that tenet may no longer be relevant, because we figured out a new way to essentially work with machines, and that may fold in this hardware software distinction so that it can be they can come back together. Example of hardware and software being one is of course the brain, and in a similar way you would teach, you know, if you could teach this new kind of computer, then that's how you could put software and hardware together. This is where it goes to learning, what you were talking about.
Guys, it's actual storm. I'm gonna have to close some windows around. Please keep talking. Just excuse me for a minute.
Sure. Yeah, I'll just be brief. It's yeah. The most interesting bit in that segment, which is probably about, I don't know, 12 minutes in, is the idea that if you just give correct answers to a student, it's a smaller amount of bits, but you are only giving the correct answers. So that's like conventional computing. If you instead train it to generalize in the way that the teacher generalizes, which includes sort of like probabilities of wrong instances, you're also simultaneously you're teaching it the right answer, but you're also teaching it generalities of wrong answers. And the example he brings up is MNIST, a 2 that looks like a 0. It's really great talk. Hard to follow at times. I've kind of lost what point he's trying to make at some point, but it's worth watching. I'd love to discuss it, and I think there's a lot of power to the idea of
What happened? Can you hear me, Alan?
I don't know, Frode.
I hear you now. Everything froze up for a few minutes. Welcome back, Frode. Everything froze up while you were out.
Oh, well, that's kind. Thank you for hacking that, Adam. I'm sure it was you. Please continue, Alan. I'm so sorry I had to run, but one of the doors was wide open, so that was not very clever.
No, no problem. I finished it up. It's just a good talk. 2 types of intelligence. It's I think it applies about 12 minutes in, maybe. It applies to the vision for education as a good technique for learning.
Yes, I think overall, I haven't seen the talk, but sounds interesting, and I think indeed it goes a little bit of what I was suggesting just before in terms of giving the right answer to Frode. That would definitely help him right away. But first, I don't have personally that answer. Like I have speculation of which one could be, but the process itself, because it can generalize and apply to so much more, even like, I don't know, to electronics or to whatever. It's not just for programming in software. It is indeed more valuable. The problem, I think, though, is if you make it too abstract and the students cannot connect to their actual goal, it sounds like philosophy, or it sounds something too abstract basically to be useful. So I think it's a tricky balance to attain. I mean, depends of course of the audience, but manage to connect like the overall kill principle or the method versus, okay, but now I need help now. What can I do with it? And yeah, not being too short-sighted basically.
Yeah, the part actually even before he talks about the teaching bit is where my mind got blown is thinking that like, oh wow, yeah, if you have analog computers, that's an example of kind of like hardware and software being blended back together, you know. And wow, we could have a future of analog computers. What would that be like? And the first example I think of is the Mississippi River, you know, I don't know, 50-mile long, massive model that they used to test out various techniques to keep the Mississippi River at bay. And that was very much like an analog computer, right? So, and in a digital sense, in a virtual sense, a lot of what we talk about isn't just exactly text. It's very much more like, how can we have this embodied cognition from direct manipulation? He's more talking about, I think, the future of AI being that we no longer need to have software as a distinction, because the hardware can be trained, and whatever the dimensions of the hardware has, that's how it will learn. It's a pretty wild talk. Like, he is thinking at a totally different level than I'd ever thought of.
Sorry, I jumped in late. What's the name of the speaker?
Oh, it's Jeffrey Hinton, Two Types of Intelligence, given like last week at Cambridge. I threw a link in there.
I mean, Hinton may know better, but one of the fallacies that a lot of folks like that come up with is that if something is thinkable, then by definition it must be inevitable, and that's not the case. Our good friend Malcolm Gladwell is very, very good at that one.
Very true.
Just because the sheer mechanics of these things have a substantial impact on whether they're actually plausible or not. I was in a Twitter Spaces the other night talking to somebody about the fact that, like, if you do graph search, like A-star, which is the standard graph search they use for pathfinding within something like a real-time strategy game, it completes in very, very handy and easy time complexity if you have a map where you have the ability to just go in any direction from any direction. But because in that way, each of the tiles in the game encodes for a node in the graph. But once you start adding additional parameters, like requiring that something can only turn a maximum of 45 degrees, then every tile on the path now that's inadequate information. What you need to do is encode in the state space which tile is there, and also what direction you're in. And if you start adding, for example, like normal vehicles, and so when I wrote this first, admittedly 20 years ago, it didn't run very well. But if you then go, well, actually vehicles have speed, and they can only speed up or slow down or turn, then and that they can also do speed up as they turn and slow down as they turn, then that state space also has to include the linear velocity, the angular velocity, the angle, and the position. And once you have all of those parameters, then a simple state space search is no longer computable for those things. It doesn't matter what kind of computer you're on; those are too many parameters. And so, as you add dimensionality to the capabilities, it's not a given that any given model, as far as I'm aware, and obviously I, by definition, know less than Hinton, but adding dimensions to the complexity of a state space search changes it in kind, in terms of the time complexity and the energy costs required to sort of finish it and compute it. So
yeah, excellent. Yeah, and he doesn't address that exactly. He does actually say the advantage of analog computing would be that, you know, you could make, rather than relying on digits, you could rely on voltage, which is how the brain works, and so you could have with far less power get, you know, way more return. But then he also says, this is how I used to think, as opposed to digital. I've reversed my thinking, right? And so now I think he's I haven't gotten this far yet because I'm still just trying to crunch through the equations. Which I never will be able to understand. But he's at the point where he's saying, like, I used to think this is how it should work. Now I think the digital paradigm, that the digital paradigm might be better than the brain. Right, the separation of hardware and software. I haven't heard that part of the argument yet, but it's pretty interesting stuff. And he says, like, he used to think this way for 50 years. In the last 3 months, he's changed his mind. He's reversed his thinking, and that's why he quit Google.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty wild.
Two paths to intelligence. Okay, awesome. I'll watch that.
Yeah, I'd love to know what you think, because I kind of grokked it to a certain point.
Yeah, no, go on.
Other quick news, I'm going to go meet Omar Rizwan, I believe, this week, and see his folk computer. So,
Awesome.
yeah, looking forward to it.
Very cool. We should probably start thinking a little bit about the next future of text, not necessarily the venue and the day. A little bit about the themes, who to invite, and such like things. What we want the point of it to be this time. You know, we've got 3 books. Do we really need a 4th one? Probably not. But it's a good focusing effort in a way. And also...
Oh, I'm late for a meeting. I'm sorry. Nice to see you all.
This is not just.
We didn't get to talk to him about the Vision Pro.
Yeah, well, I think maybe if you do a 4th one, it should be, you should start out with like instead of "Don't Panic," maybe call it Hitchhiker's Guide to Text. Instead of "Don't Panic," just be like "Told ya." In regards to VR.
That's kind of interesting. I met with Douglas Adams a few times. Really clever guy. He had this idea for virtual graffiti, where you write with whatever device, but it's to the physical space you're in. You can only read it when you're in that location.
I've had that exactly. That's crazy. Wow, awesome.
Well, you are clever.
Can I ask a favor? Frode, if you meet him again, can he write anything on a postcard for my better half?
Douglas Adams, I'm not planning suicide anytime soon, but he is dead.
Oh shit.
Yeah, I know. That's what a lot of people said. Yeah, he died young. It was just ridiculously awful. So here's the thing. I am trying to get support from Apple for me, for my software and all of that stuff. It's the email that I'm drafting. I'll just paste it for you here again. So the top part of that is the email. It's to the head of education at Apple, Karen. And so the first half is the email, the rest of it is that webpage. So the thing is, just like Symposium and books and all. Could you hear that?
We can.
That sounds like a salute. Wow. Okay, they've been warning. Okay. So I'm trying to put more real stuff in there. So in the same way, oh, what's that? A link.
So it could be an example of real stuff. I did not read it yet, but I follow this journal for kids. So scientific research, but for kids. And this article should be interesting for everyone because it's about space. I don't want to say space neuron, but location, how neurons encode position in space. So I think generally, it's interesting, but especially when we work in XR even more so. And why do I put it there in interrupters? Because it's written for kids. So I think in terms of education, it's pretty good. And it's still like top of the state of the art in research. It's not like, oh, I don't know, Da Vinci did this 500 years ago or something. It's like current research. And I think if that I would integrate this kind of thing as a kind of compelling vision of education, in the sense that as far as I know, you're not a dedicated educator for kids, except as a father, which is already a lot, but it's not the same as this, for example. So I think maybe considering how this kind of quality content could be integrated or used or leveraged or enriched could be interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm kind of having a second wind with my corrections for my thesis, and I'm now looking at Jupyter notebooks and all of that stuff again. Absolutely. The education that I'm looking at is probably more university level, though, and more document based. And so here's the thing. Obviously, it will be good for me if we have more VR stuff to show. But I think you considering helping me would be a clarifying of the mind, because we go in all kinds of different directions. If you were the ones trying to get a job at Apple, what would you want to show? Right? There is that amazing thing that Adam put together in 2D based on all the hypertext journals, which could have been visual meta imports. You know, that's a real thing. It's linked in here, obviously. But okay, so here's the thing. My pitch to Apple is that my software is highly interactive and the world is interactive. If you look at the page, there is a quote there from a new book I just got that says, and I know you're all going to love this quote, "Perception is highly active." That's from the book, The Myth of the Mirror Neuron. Wonderful book, silly title. So, you know, we're all on the same page there. But what I'm trying to sell to Apple for them to want me is I'm deeply involved with interactive text, but also Apple seems to be closest with what they have to allow people to do actual work in VR. To do actual work in the Quest is really clunky. You can do an educational experience, a game experience, but even just to do a shared room or to work on your laptop, it takes a lot of setting up and things don't work and so on. So here's the question then. What is the next step that we can deliver for a student? By student, I mean somebody who wants to learn. Doesn't mean they're involved in an institution or not, right?
This is a different topic than what the next edition of Future of Text would be about. Is that correct?
No, it's exactly the same topic, because my university professor, who passed away 2 weeks ago, and it's still horrible, he was very good at asking questions. And one of the things he also said was deadlines make things happen. So if we look at all of this in one thing, but you know, Future of Text is only a couple of months away, October, November, I can't even remember, but this time, can we do more than a book? Is what I was mumbling, trying to say. Right? How?
Sure.
Okay. Whether it's for the vision or Quest or whatever, obviously shouldn't matter to us. We want it to be done in web VR, right? So this time, can we actually do that? Obviously, I would like visual meta to be part of it, but if you all fight me, we don't do that, that's fine. But the idea of, here's a book, printed or digital, PDF or whatever, oh, and here's the virtual experience of it. I think we can really do something this time. I think we learned things last year.
So what I can do, but I don't know if it's the full vision you have in mind, is I can definitely do let's say a chapter that would be a notebook, JavaScript notebook, about a topic. I don't know what yet, but that would be a notebook that can be at least in part experienced in VR.
Yeah, that would be cool. Sorry, air conditioner. Yeah, something like that would be very cool. And you know, we should start making, you know, I've been doing, I don't know if you've seen Adam, but I've gone through the journal and taken all the journal articles into one thing with no pictures. So in Reader, it can be manipulated. It's 330,000 words, roughly. And you know, we started playing around with color and stuff. Isn't this the time, now that we have a rich enough corpus of our own work, that we can stretch it into the third dimension somehow?
So I think it's good to clarify what the main kind of work or purpose or the things you want to do in VR to guide the kind of interaction and experience, or is it for skimming? Because the color work is mostly for skimming, finding the right places to read, I guess. And then there is reading, and and different levels of reading, also kind of very active reading where you the kind of margin note, the kind of reading where you really think about things or extract paragraphs or extract text and write your own comments, and then there is also the sending, the kind of book club thing where you co-read, or maybe you're even co-present in the book, that two people or more people jump into the book and discuss it live. So so when we say reading, as we said before, that is that's a bunch of activities that we put under the same name. So it could be good to clarify then what kind of reading we want to do most, or what would be the most interesting experience to start with.
It would seem to me, I had a discussion yesterday with some unrelated to the field people, and they're about, oh, why would I want to work with a headset, all of that stuff, with something to my head. So in answer to your question, we should probably try to use each media to its advantage, to its strength. Like reading a physical paper book will probably be loved by most of us forever. So this is probably a skimming, probably saying relationships between documents or within a document. Yes, you have developed some really useful and cool reading where the text even stays with your head. That kind of stuff is absolutely appropriate. But I do think that the thing that Randall said in the beginning of persuading us to go into VR world was the volume of information that can be more easily comprehended is enormous. So we should probably try to do a large corpus, like Mark's corpus of hypertext that you worked with, Adam. There's a lot of data there. Just for somebody to look into that. And my hook to that would be, if these documents are visual meta, it's automatic, right? Done. I don't need to do anymore. But the actual interactions with that can be really cool. And I think we're going to learn a lot by trying, like, visual line connections are cool, but they can quickly become too much and stuff like that.
So what do we envision what will we comprehend in VR that we won't comprehend in flat space or ordinary reading or on the regular screen? What can we comprehend? Because we just say comprehension often when we talk about new technologies, and we say connections, but connections, the whole world is connections or fields. It doesn't really say anything if it's meaningful. So it's some kind of meaningful and very useful connections that we want to have from this that we can't get in another media. And what could that be then?
That's the research question, Adam.
But in order to
for the transcript, that was important. Okay, cool.
Yeah, but do we have a hunch already? Of course, it's a further research question, but I think we lived in 3D for a good while, all our years in the physical meat space. So we could have some intuitions from the physical space, and we could have some intuitions from working with interactive text already that may translate and may make 3D text or virtual text even better, immersive text. Do we have any hunches? Yep.
It doesn't quite exactly answer the prompt, but I'll start with this. AI is built around a metaphor of biology, right? Neurons. And it seems to be pretty successful as a metaphor. And contrasted to that is HTML and CSS, which is built around an industrial age metaphor. Could it be, is there a possibility in VR or something that we have a chance to redo HTML and CSS and build it off of a biological metaphor or some other kind of metaphor? What would that look like? One of the things I've been playing with, I haven't quite decided whether it's worth it or valuable, but it's instead of treating things as links, or specifically instead of treating things as entities, if you think in terms of hyperplanes, then you could have an observation, let's say a quote from the book A Metaphysical Club that says want preferred the Kantian term apperception, right? So there's just, you could boil that down to the three main things: want, Kantian, apperception, right? Preferred the term apperception. You could break that down in kinds of trees that we've seen for hundreds of years, or you could say this is a hyperplane and of like data points on a hyperplane. And then instead of thinking of links, like want is an entity on its own, show me all other instances of want. There would be other intersecting hyperplanes, a high dimensional space, right? And shoot, I kind of lost the thread, but the point is, whenever you go to a graph metaphor, you lose the narrative thread. You just have want is pointing to Kant, which Kant points to apperception, right? And you lose that there was a connection between them, right? If instead of these like dots and lines, if that was a hyperplane and other hyperplanes interacted with it, then you could sort of keep this narrative flow preserved within kind of a high dimensional graph space, or vector space, I should say. So like, and that sounds intimidating, but it's not meant to be. It's meant to just be like, is there a different way to think about links? And of course, CSS is a different topic, but is there a different way to think about links that could preserve a narrative flow, but also allow for a different kind of search? So that's a prompt for you guys. It's a bit mushy, but
So when you say this, I have to probe the idea a bit. This hyperplane, does that divide the content, or does content pass through it in some way? If we have a book and they're divided by a plane or hyperplane, does a paragraph or a narrative pass through that hyperplane at points, or is it living on that hyperplane at a distance? Or what do you mean by this hyperplane? What does it represent really?
well, yeah, I have it all drawn out here actually, and unfortunately I can't. Maybe
Is it yeah, that is. So that speaks to the co-present part. We need VR to point to things to be co-present.
Exactly. Yeah.
To reinvent the whiteboard that we lost along the way.
Yeah. Well, and that's, to answer your question, it would a paragraph could be a hyperplane, but it wouldn't have to be. A hyperplane really could be thought of as a simple simple math: A plus B equals C, right? That's enough to be a hyperplane, right? And that's just like or an observation. That's just its own, and it might exist there. And then if that's a strip of paper, right, that just has those three items, you could have any number of other planes that are intersecting through anything that says 1, or anything that says 3, or 3 and 1. And it doesn't work at such a small scale like that, but I think it could work at a larger scale when you're talking about paragraphs. And the hope is that you would be able to get a search that isn't just tell me about the times that this guy showed up in this book, but that you could kind of radiate out from a single hyperplane to all its intersection points, and kind of use a Hamming distance sort of like, what are other sentences or observations that interact the most times with this hyperplane, right? That have the most things in common. So references to Kant, references to apperception.
So do you imagine that we see the whole book, or and it intersects that different texts or paragraphs or words or phrases
would be kind of
intersect this
like-
plane, or will it appear on that plane, and or what, is it a plane of search results, or is it a plane that divides virtual space in some way?
To put it in the context of reader, it would be like going to the index and seeing the alphabetical list of everything listed, every reference
Yep.
rather. And then everything is grayed out except for 3 items where there's a line, that says like, here's one item and it's referenced, in association to this item. And also this one within the same sort of narrative thread, right? And that would be a single view, right? But you could radiate out, you could start to, from that point, bring in other, not just relations, but other sentences that might cascade through these concepts, right? These references. Again, I would have to, yeah, you're right. I would totally have to draw it out. And I'm trying to see if there's a way that I can do it dynamically, because even just this drawn out version is still too confusing. So I want to attempt it to.
And it sounds like quite an ambitious project that requires quite
Yeah, it would be like- it would be
sophisticated text analysis, I guess.
Yeah, hopefully the toy version wouldn't be that difficult. It would be a different way of going through an index in one sense, like a VR index, right? But instead of just seeing the alphabetical list, you could see how, get a sense of when an item is listed, how it relates, or what its proximity is to other items in the index. You can get a sense of the context in which it's being used.
So it would be interesting to hear, because now we heard this hyperplane idea. Fabian want a JavaScript book or chapter, or could produce it. He said, what would that be? Some sort of programmatic text, I guess, as you mentioned, a programming language. And Frode, you wanted some sort of translation of the coloration idea into VR, I guess, or is that one of the ideas?
So one of the things I've asked my guys to look at is, I'm not sharing, hang on, I'll just share briefly. That is half the answer, yes. Here is the color thing that you've seen before. That's just the horrible things there. But as by itself is not that useful, but we also have a view that shows automatically all the names in the document and headings. Command-Shift-N, here you go. So what we're going to experiment with is a view that combines these things, but the visuals have a hard-coded meaning for some of them, so that your color keywords, fine, you decide whatever you want, but we're going to remove the black and the gray, so that the names will always be italic black, because that looks like a signature, a human signature. And then we'll have to decide on something, and I'd love to hear what you think, to have the defined concepts as well, if they don't already have a color in it, and maybe gray. So that this view shouldn't have to necessarily be, show me this or that or this or that. It should be, show me a dimensionally colorful, useful overview. You know, there's so many things we can increase. We can increase, if some keyword is used more, it could be bigger. Or in a proper 3D environment, it could be deeper, right? So you can see it has more depth. And the plane idea that Alan was talking about, even superficially taking from that, we can start playing around with that. One of the earliest things I did with visualization of text in a digital thing was to have rendered in, look like metal type, just for fun. And as you twist whatever text it is, keyword, you will see all the dimensions it exists in, how it relates to a glossary entry, how it relates to searches and all of that stuff. So the ability to, whether it's planes, and I think planes is very provocative compared to nodes and lines, absolutely. But these different things, and the thing that surprised me when doing the experiments in the room was when I had one single line connecting something in the room, it was actually really annoying. It was like a clothing wire or fishing wire, and it wasn't even there. So a lot of our thinking about this is just not going to work. So almost anything we can do, we should do.
And I should caveat, I probably forgot to mention this, but hyperplane is a term in feature engineering for ML, right? It's how you come to understand how certain points relate when you're kind of like going through a one lens versus another, right? And so hyperplane is different than a normal plane in that it can fold around itself. It can be all different kinds of shapes. It's not meant to be like a thing that you actually look at so much as it's evidence of a line of association.
Yeah, but still, we have to project something down to the immersive spaces and from the hyperplane. So, and for me, it's easier to think in 3 or 4 dimensions, but n dimensions is harder to get for me.
Yeah.
I mean, Peter, I'll give you the mic in a second, but the thing is, I don't know what I want from Apple, to be honest, right? But I have to get my life a little bit more in order. I need to make more money. I just have to be honest about that. Not a huge amount, I'm okay. But there's a bit of reality setting in to my situation. And I think that is okay. It helps focus the mind. So what I'm asking for Apple is, can you help me port my software to Vision OS through financial or whatever? But more importantly, and this is a key thing for all of us, marketing. The most expensive thing for an independent developer is the marketing cost, for people to find the stuff. I mean, I've had emails and YouTube comments this week from people saying, do I have an iOS version? Oh, this is fantastic. How can I learn more? It's really, really nice to hear. But how the hell do I tell more people? It's really difficult. So whether, Apple is my current fixation. I know it's not everybody's here. And if that doesn't work, I will do something else. But the point is, maybe this will help narrow our mind. What are the useful things that when you put on the headset, it's not a gimmick. It can help you view a specific corpus of text. And I'm really thinking we should start with maybe our own 3 books and 1/3 words in the journal or something. And the task for the person putting it on is somebody not in our community, but kind of interested, or we've dragged them in, put this thing on their head, click the thing, and they can, through relatively natural interactions, have a bit more of a clue of 2 things. 1, how to navigate our work, and 2, what are we looking, what kind of things are we looking at, to the point where they'll know, and then they can open it. Now, if they want to specifically read a thing or watch a video, they should be able to do that on their Apple Watch or on their computer or on their Linux system. It doesn't matter. We just have to make it a hub that can go anywhere. Peter, unless anyone has a specific question on that particular detail. No? Okay, Peter.
Okay, I'm making solid headway in my testbed tooling hell. I've got it now so that I have a basic Electron framework that can automatically live update as I'm editing my source code in development mode, but also be exported into standalone Mac or cross-platform app in final production mode. I've worked out how to bring in libraries that only exist in ES6 format into the CommonJS world of the initial main process under Electron, so that I can get those libraries out and use them also in the renderer process. So it's been a real nightmare of a lot of trying and testing, but it's almost at the point now where the test bed is going to be solid enough so in another couple of weeks, I'll be able to share it with the group and other people can start experimenting on top of it. Again, once the test, and I'm using the Velociraptor task runner system on top of it all to fire off in parallel all of the different backend tasks that I need in order to transpile my IMBA into JavaScript, update the Vite bundler package to deal with all of the front end stuff, update Electron and Electron Forge in order to generate the back end and package everything. So it's a big mess, but it's one of those real ugly things you have to do once and then you can forget about it. Then I can start actually doing interesting work. And I really want to go and see if I can build a initial implementation of a Benedictine cyberspace. I really love that idea of being able to unfold from one set of 3 dimensions into a space containing another set of 3 dimensions and bounce around like that. I was really hoping that the Apple Vision demo was going to show something along those lines for abstract data visualization that it didn't have in it. So I think that's a useful avenue to take a look at. Another thought that comes to mind is setting aside headsets for a while. There are a couple companies that are trying to build autostereoscopic displays using light field technology and a couple other approaches. And maybe we could reach out to them to find out if there are any researchers who are using their external 3D display technologies in their work and see if we could start trying to do some networking that way. Okay, over to you guys.
Yeah, that was a lot. I mean, especially the last bit you said there about light field and all of that stuff. I really look forward to watching Avatar in the Vision Pro. I'm not really a fan of the movie, but from everything I've heard, that experience, because they're doing so many clever things. 3D movies are presented in a frame in the Vision. So you don't necessarily have motion sickness because you have enough of visual context that you're still in a room. But apparently the depth effect is really impressive. So when you're talking about light field and things like that, just visually, yeah, it can be, it should be extraordinary and be brought into this work.
Fabian, when you said the computational book, what would you like to have from a chapter of a computational chapter of future of text, for example? What could it do for you that you would like to have?
So, for example, if for the text, let's say the source of the text of the chapter, to avoid being circular and some of the challenge we had before, let's say if I take the content of the research article for kids that I put in the chat before on space cells, or place cells rather, let's say maybe the whole article as is, and then some segment of it would be experiences. So segments that would be the most, let's say, appropriate. At least, let's say, I would like to have at least 2 of them, so that it's not just like, oh, the text and an experience, but at least a couple of experiences that would help to understand better, but that would still be led to the user. So I don't want to read the text in there, but if I'm having the experience and I'm in there, I might want to be able to quickly glance back at the text because I read, let's say, part of it until I reached that point with the live example. And eventually a little bit also in the notebook mindset that some of the things were widgets to change values, and then the system updates itself, and that by changing those values, the person who is having the experience is learning better. So I would say a couple of at least 2 small pedagogical experiences based on that text, plus let's say 1 or 2 tools on how to interact back with the text, like, I don't know, maybe highlighting or literally drawing lines between the experiments that's being run in the headset and the text also shown in the headset. And then as an output, let's say when you finish with the experience and you remove the headset, that whatever you have done is somehow saved somewhere, let's say server side, so that you can either send it to another friend or colleague or another kid, and then they can do the same, but with your annotation or whatever you did in there, and that you can have it easy to share, including for people that don't have the headset.
By the way, working again with a bit of zeal on my thesis today, it reminds me again that for a large volume, the problem is really navigation when editing. So I've broken my document up into a few documents so I can work on one section at a time. That shouldn't really be necessary. We should have better folding. We've tried it in Author before, but it became unstable. But that might also be a useful thing if we don't look at reading, if we look at authorship in a spatial environment, how to be able to break up your text in a different way and still have it linear on export to share it with people in a way that they can open it up.
Yeah, overall, I think manipulation of the text itself is definitely interesting, but yeah, I would still read if it's a text with, let's say, more than 2 or 3 paragraphs, I would not read it in the headset. Still having it around, either skim through, pull out the paragraph and move them around, link between the experience and the paragraph the paragraphs I've read so far. I think that would be very nice. Better manipulation, intuitive manipulation.
Yeah, I was thinking more for authorship rather than readership, but
yeah, but it goes back a little bit to Adam's remark when we started to discuss reading. We have different ways to read, and it's a bit of if we talk about, let's say, not reading a fiction book, I think one of our guests a couple of months ago, I forgot his name, Belgian, and his research was also about. I don't like to say academic, but more academic reading in the sense that if you read a paper, then it's full of notes. You have your highlighter, you have some pencil, you have fold, so in a way it is as much reading as writing. You have your own ideas on the side, so yeah, it's a bit of a richer process than reading a fiction book where you basically live it as is.
oh yeah, hi Alan. Adam, what do you want? How do you answer your own question?
So part of my question was what would I like to start with, I think. And so far, the thing that I think is the most missing from today is co-presence, remote co-presence. Even here, we can't point to things. Our hands are not shown, and we can't show text in a good way here. We send links to speeches and papers, but we can't even point to the papers here. So in that sense, I think co-presence is the most important part that I want to address first, maybe. That we take a text, any text, maybe not even future text, because but let's say it's future text, but a text that really excites us, because time on Earth is limited. And it may be that we don't want to read this text because we have been there enough. But so I would propose that we do the book club thing. We take a text, we deconstruct it, we comment on it, and we make it so several people can enter that space at the same time. So not really a memory palace. It will act as that as well if you spatialize things, but more of a shared memory palace. So a workroom of some sort, but where text is text and related resources, maybe images as well, are at the center. That would be a well enough scoped thing, I think, and also showcasing the things that XR, VR could be really good at. Because it sounds like we're not so sure about reading in that space, reading itself, like reading longer, that we want to do on in other media, and we're not so sure about what we want to get from what I'm hearing. We're not so sure what we want to get out from the VR experience yet. For real, we're hoping that there are enough things there, but we're not so sure yet. I'm just mind reading here, and I don't know, but I'm not so sure what I want to do there. But I really know that co-presence is not the something in computing, and we can't really share a room and point to things remotely in a good way yet. And trying out the workrooms and the different VR applications, I see a trace of something great there, that we could actually see hands for real pointing at things and looking at the same resources. And I've had good experiences so far with that, or traces of good experiences. Yep.
Co-presence is important, but if we were in the same room, we could do that together relatively easily. I think what would be really powerful is when the information itself is more spatialized. You know, like a 3D concept map, for instance. I think that is something that can easily become really, really bad, but if done right and really thought about and experimented with, could become very powerful. I mean, even just having because okay, I understand the whole reading thing, but to me, when the text is small, it almost becomes like a demo. But if you have a large volume of documents or text, then it becomes a real task of how the heck do you make sense of it? How do you find what you want to read properly? Sorry, just looking at Fabienne there, trying not to smile.
You can smile.
Okay, good. Yeah, I mean, we've talked about onboarding every once in a while for the last few years too, as well, for people coming into the community. And right now, it's really bad what we have. Yeah, I see that, Fabienne. So that's why obviously I'm doing what I can for the 2D experience of people navigating our corpus in different ways, but I mean, we have imagined many times having lots of documents in a VR space, but until we actually build it, Brandel built the dynamic view in a VR space, and it was really fascinating, and it was also pretty bad, which is great. That's the first step. You talked in the beginning of this talk about coding. If it works the first time around, you're doing something wrong, haha. It's obviously similar with experiences. If you do something in a VR environment that works immediately, then probably we haven't imagined it far enough.
But so let's say that we do a VR experience where we can navigate and we can see all the topics, for example, that it colors up in some way, that we can see here's AI, here's something about language models, here is VR, here is Apple headset, that we at different granularities, that we could, like a heat map or something around that a topical map of a work or several books or a library. Even with that, I feel that we're not, I want to be closer to the actual value making. I'm not that constrained by sense making in that dimension, I think, like overview sense making. In a way, I think I'm too much there in that sense. I'm navigating texts too much, and I want to engage with text. I rather engage with a paragraph or a single thought more than navigating and then traversing documents more. I'm more constrained in that way in my life currently. I'm traversing enormous amounts of text. Mind palacing would help a bit to get back to things, and also kind of the shared workroom to be able to put a few documents in there, or paragraphs or texts, and hand that over to you as a document or as a space or as a service. But I want to read, I think, or work with the ideas and take notes more. I think that is a thing I'm missing most for my life, but I don't know how it is for you.
So Peter just posted this. I'm very glad he did, to remind us of the early days of hot sauce and what that became. But just wanted to show you, you're talking about taking notes and working. So what I've done in my world is I have a keyboard shortcut that copies from a PDF in a specific way. So when I go to author and I go to the journal, which is one document I always have available, it pastes with this kind of a citation. So it has the title, so it makes it more of a journal, a research journal, so I can find it again. Now, having something that simple in the kind of, oh, hang on, there's actually one more thing to show you. Because in this environment, we have the defined concepts, they're here. I can look them up anytime, they're related to the document. Of course, there's headings, so we can jump around. Same here with the documents. It is very old-fashioned and boring interaction, having these things at the top, but they are actually quite fast to get to. So I would imagine it would be much more interesting if we had a way to take notes and organize them spatially.
Yeah. So what I'm thinking, because I have been working in three different versions of kind of those infinite canvas things. I've programmed things, and my main conclusions from all of them is that I do that. I copy with kind of a transclusions from my own libraries in different ways. Where you see small parts with the metadata and data preserved, and you can get back to the source. But after a while, I feel that it's not enough. It doesn't give me any, and I diss my own projects because it's not giving me too much value. And same with all the infinite canvases that I've tried on, like all the muses and I do it for a while, and it doesn't really give me a deep, meaningful experience. And people say that those systems increase in value with if you put more notes into them, that the value increases. But for me, it increases up to the first 500 items, then it decreases again. Same with Evernote, and so it's kind of a bell curve thing, and then I have to pick a new tool and do my next bell curve on. So I don't know if we spatialize future of text, will we have a spatialized pile of things that we are not really using then?
I think you are 100% on, and for once, I'm glad Mark Anderson is not on the call. He couldn't make it today. I'm glad he's not on the call, because he would now spend the next half an hour talking about how adding to the bucket doesn't add value, which is something I'm very glad he's done. The fantasy I have is multiple knowledge clusters. So let's say there's a cluster from now. I wish I could literally just crunch it up and throw it onto the calendar. That means that I didn't actually think of that until I said it, which is weird. So there's a calendar over there in the room. So whatever we're working on, it's gone. It's saved by that dimension of the calendar, right? And then I have a piece of work that Alan has produced. It's also a graphy type thing. So there's a meaning to it. I spend time thinking because it's a product. It's not just general. But at that point of interaction, I should be able to choose, is there anything from my stuff? Or is there anything from the internet? Or is there anything from the community that may relate? So then I can see connections, not necessarily lines, but connections to that in a manner that I can easily toggle on and off. So the whole point of, I think it was
And could I just zoom in on one of the? So what do you want that interaction for? You get kind of peripheral things that are connected to the, and what do you do? What value do you want to have from that?
I'll be real
So
quick.
it's related. It's related, but what do you want from it?
I'll be real quick because Fabian has to go in a second. What I want, ideally, is my entire knowledge work, everything in this space, plus my team, which could be you or another team. So it is the notion of groupings that's really, really important. So I want to be able to see your structure. Maybe it's linear, whatever, understand it, but I need to be able to reach out. We can now do it with a keyword search in Google or whatever, but that's such a narrow little vision. To be able to see this at times toggle would be, it's to increase the context. Fabian, please.
Yeah, I'll briefly share my screen. Hello.
Hi. Daddy.
Hello.
Hi.
We have to listen. Fabian has to go. Just say hi really big.
Hi.
Hello. So I'll share my screen to show you a little bit what I was tinkering with. So you can see the headset output, I hope.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you. So what I did is this URL here.
I have to listen to the guys.
If I move it next to a text editor, then it's going to load it replaces the content of the text editor by the content of the URL. Does that make sense?
What the content of the URL? Obviously, it's a basic web page, not just any page, right?
Yeah, well, it's the Moby Dick extract because that's what we use for the demo day. So it could be any page that has text, and the point basically of this.
So if it sees a URL, it pulls it into your and right now it displays it as pretty plain text, but it could be expanded in the future.
Yes.
Is that?
Yes, I don't want to talk about the future, but obviously yes. Right, just plain text is the way to start. JavaScript with what's the name? With the syntax highlighting, because we tinker with that before, but the idea is like before you have snippet of text, some of this text can be full URL, and if you drop it close enough to an editor, so you already have a couple of editors there in the space, then you load the content in that editor, and then you can split them or do whatever you would want to do with the editor. And the idea is to have part of the shared file system there with the different devices, and then you can explore the content of the file system, eventually modify it there. So
these questions are very valuable, Adam. So I remember Doug Engelbart telling me when he got older that one of his key problems is he forgot what he's already written when he was trying to write something new. So in line with what you're talking about, you put too much stuff in, it loses value. Just have a system for your own published stuff, not necessarily published to the world, even private, where you say, okay, this is now a thing. And I got, please stop doing that for a moment, it's a bit loud. And then make that findable in different ways is as important, if not more, than making it findable the things you have read that other people have done. And on that very same point, my first PhD advisor, Wendy Hall, she says she doesn't have time to write anymore. She wishes she could just take chunks and it would become a thing, which seems to relate to that as well.
So usually the sound dropped. That was your. Usually for my things, there is a small selection of things that is much more valuable. I think there is a kind of a power law for my things. Most information that I save have a quite short shelf life. In a year, it will have a low value. So I think it's very important when we design a system, and same for future of text. I think that also follows a power law. it could be a few sentences that are really eye-opening, and the rest is not worth so much to you. And same with any book and and also between books, that a few books are so much more valuable. So we need a way to kind of lenses that increases the proportions depending on what kind of information. And I don't know how to do that because it's not obvious how to do it with your own work even.
Adam's power law of knowledge. One thing that can maybe help on that one is fax paper. My father would print out everything, all the faxes, and as you know, over time a fax gets old. So you could instantly look at his desk, and stuff that was more yellow, the other had to act on or get rid of. So time in a fuzzy way can maybe contribute a little bit.
Yeah, and that is good. And we can imagine VR paper that when you pick it up, it becomes white again. So we know it could be both yellow and white. So we know that we're using it often, or we pick it up often, and that means something. So it could be whitened if we use it a lot, or blued maybe. Fabian?
Well, Fabian is realizing that he's ready to speak. Imagine picking up a document in VR, and it's so old, you shake it, and all you have left is a skeleton metadata. It's like Fishbone, but it's just the metadata.
I have to run away, unfortunately, because also I go to Paris tomorrow to give a talk. The good thing that why I mentioned it here is in order to give the talk, I'm going to go to Lynx, which is a French VR company, and they basically do this or the Quest Pro equivalent, but it's not Meta. So, and I will be able to try WebXR specifically for it because they did some funding for work in Volvic, and maybe load some, I hope, some of my own content in it. I'm still waiting for my headset from them. But, yeah, I'll share with you next week how it went. But yeah, while also waiting for Vision Pro, it's nice to also look for better alternatives in other dimensions. And I put the code related to the tiny experiment because I dropped URL to code editor, but it's a more general way to do a dropping content so that it can be any other function. That would be primitive. But I really gotta run. Sorry. Take care. It was a lovely discussion again. Bye-bye.
Good luck tomorrow.
Bye. Thank you.
Edgar brought this, these kinds of magnets.
Cool.
Yeah. So what's interesting about this particular type of magnet, there's got to be several kind of glued together in a way inside, because when I do this, it still works. It works in both directions. And I can also turn it upside down and it still works.
Wow.
These things shouldn't be possible.
Lodestones.
Because of the polarities, right? But of course, having magnets in this kind of dynamic environment is an interesting interaction. And what I really think we need to do, yes, it's too loud, but actually sound, of course, should be part of it too at some point, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. What I really think and I'm talking about we as in the entire world and our community, is put our own real data into some sort of format, JSON, database, whatever, that is readily accessible in a VR environment, and then make as big a mess as we can. Try different interactions, have the planes and magnets and see if it becomes crazy. Do colors that are primarily purple because apparently programmers like that. Whatever, just again and again and again, and in a shared environment so that, when we meet, we can meet in Zoom, put our headsets on, whether we're exactly the same environment or not. I'm not as strongly excited as Adam. It will be nice if we can point around, but it depends on the effort to do that. Yeah, I mean, because just look at the little thing I've asked my guys if they can do now. If it's really simple, they can do it because I don't have much money anymore for this project. Do the colors and the names and the defined concepts. It's not rocket science, is it? But if we also have a specific view in these things, we put in this huge corpus. One of the cool things we can maybe do is replace our names with avatars, right? All kinds of interesting ways just to make it thing.
Daddy, put that.
That's Peter, and he's hiding. It's just a picture. Peter's face is not on for some reason.
No, he's sitting very still.
Yeah, maybe that's it. Oh, he's making a yellow face, going, "Wah," just for you. Do you want to do that face back to him?
Yeah.
Do it. Big. Okay, here. So we click, you see here, what's that word? Or reactions. Click on that. Then we choose the face, open mouth. And now look up here, we're doing it. Yeah. Finding stuff and seeing connections in your own work and that of others seems to be close to what we are talking about, right?
I'm not so much of a connections guy. Well, everything is connections, but there is only a very small subset of connections that I'm interested in. I primarily want to do the connections in my head, and I don't need the computer to do that many connections for me, I think. But of course, I can imagine magical systems that does a lot of connections for me, or serve me plates with interesting things. But the problem is that there are so many plates around with the interesting things, so I need less plates with interesting, relevant things, and I need to kind of shield myself from that and work with smaller pieces. Actually, work with it, protect myself from information.
I'm very glad you said that, because you're putting yourself in the BuSpec camp, so to speak, now. And I think that is very, very important. You should be able to follow connections, no question, right? I know you agree with that, that they come from your head, spark points, inspirations. To have too many of them presented for you, unless you specifically request a dimension of connections to be shown. Do you remember not that long ago, early web, there was this thing of in the side of an article that would suggest other things you could read on that topic? Why in the world would anyone want that? You know, unless you say, I don't get it, please show me something else I can read on this. It's clever. So, you know, it's nice to have a strong position on this, so we know where we are. I mean, just imagine this, Future of Text, the next one, and we invite some really wonderful people who don't really know much about VR or text, but we like them for some other reason. And we all meet here in London, because it's got to be London, that's what Bint want. And they've done their little presentation, little in terms of time, put the headset on, and wow, they have a clue about what we've been doing for the last many years. You know, they start saying, hang on, this and that will be amazing, that will be real in real world.
I definitely I'm tracking all that, but I'm also curious as to when the other senses can come into play and the value of analogs. Part of this experiment that I'm working on is kind of like it's again, like Adam was saying, just for organizing my own knowledge from day to day. Just it's a journey, it's a hieroglyph. But if I added things like little QR code stickers throughout, can I start to add in an augmented layer level to it? Can it get to a point that I could just put on some cheap glasses, maybe not VR, but cheap enough to read those little QRs or colored dots and get another layer, like the lost memory that's on the other side of the scroll rolled up? Can I bring that back into play? You know, and if that's possible, then is there a value to, I think there's still something so valuable about just being able to write or draw out your idea and not have to go through that, even if it's very subtle, that little bit of friction of, here's the paradigm that I'm in a digital paradigm, or I'm in a coding paradigm, or even just a keyboard paradigm. You know, text in a computer is necessarily, well, it's nice lines out of the box, right? But if you don't want to write in lines, right? I still think that there's some kind of forgotten value to our natural senses. And I'd love to see some more tools that can, I don't know, this whole thing has been very nice, nicer than writing in a journal.
So one thought when you presented your scroll thing, physical paper scroll or a big paper, is that it would be interesting if your cheap glasses or iPhone or whatever, or a high-end vision headset, whenever you came back to that scroll, it knows that I'm allowed to take a photo of the newest version, because you said that this image is okay to copy. So
Oh.
whenever you came close to, or when you flip through your notebook, it's allowed to update the digital version of it. So it always, whenever it sees this, it puts it into your digital space. You have your scroll with you in your phone. You can't really add to it because you write with a pen usually, but you can connect notes to it that you can bring up the next time you come back to your physical scrolls. So your phone, when you come back, it will ping you with the 5 ideas that you could put in there.
Yeah.
So
Go ahead.
So it's not even a QR code. It's just that it recognizes that scroll because it's easy to match it, and then it takes a continuous scan of it or video of it and process it, so it always has a updated version.
One of the surprises of using Apple's latest technology is I texted a little bit to someone, and they were able to identify the object in the photos, picture of my dog, and pull that from the background, in that little thing that you can do in the text message. So it's already like, with a slight update in my process on paper, I could take a photo and then it automatically extract that chunk just in text message form, which is pretty exciting, almost automatic. And then I could dump it into like today's journal or something, or some sort of text my journal.
That is a really powerful thing. And because of that, if I take a picture when I read a book, I have something underlined, just take a picture, and in Photos, I copy that text, paste it into Author. Author will know what book it's from.
That's awesome.
Yeah, because of Google Books. But I mean, like, we're all going to be watching the next season of Foundation, obviously, right?
No.
Awesome.
No, maybe
I didn't like it. Sorry.
Bye. Okay, well, okay, just forget all that. But the interactions, I mean, imagine you're talking about a big scroll. Imagine I just, I made this little thing. I haven't used it yet. Absolutely love it. Imagine an interaction where suddenly stuff comes off the page, right? That's easy. Mm-hmm. It would be cool. But what will be the point? The point would be this thing we've discussed and we agree with. The Apple Vision Pro has cameras in the front, powerful cameras. So the whole recognizing a QR code or text in a book or even a human drawing will be, I guess, relatively trivial. So if it has the context of where that scroll, that massive scroll or that little book was, we should be able to do more in the virtual space with it without losing the ability to work on the original. I think that is very, very important. And I think that similarly to how we would want, our virtual walls to have information on them, we should also be able to put up those posters, absolutely. So that this is the thing. When you have opportunity going up or in one direction, you also have it in the opposite direction. That's what happens. That's what's interesting. And when something
so what's the opposite direction? Is it kind of the shadow side or the bad side of it, or is it something else?
Volatility, maybe?
It's everything. So, for instance, there's the good and bad, absolutely. On the world scale, that's really horrible to contemplate. But what I mean is, when you go big, you can also go small. It's like McLuhan's tetrad. Media will reverse in on itself. So the more we go into this incredible virtual world, the more we will also be able to take advantage of our analog world. Right? There will be small things along the lines of what you're talking about, Alan, that will connect the two.
Mm-hmm.
And the hand drawing thing. When I'm reading this book here, the Myth of the Mirror Neuron, I love doing the underlines in a human way, much more than on Reader doing that, right? So we will be able to extract that, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, one thing that would be really, really great on the future of text, and I'm hoping you would all be here. That would be lovely. So we have a big venue. We have a huge poster on the side of the room where we draw out. Maybe Alan, you are the drawer or whatever we call it for that. And at the end of it, it's also intelligently digital. You know, first of all, imagine if it can somehow be matched up with the recording of the session. So we can, you know, it's actually filmed. You know, we'll stick a camera on it.
Yeah.
So we have that. We have the audio, and then we can have it played back based on that. We can have the text wherever it's handwritten analyzed. That's fine. You know, this gets really, really exciting. And also, maybe for this future of text, we should film with multiple cameras so we can do some basic photogrammetry. Maybe it's time for that. You know, 3 cameras should be enough to capture a person. And then maybe have a specific camera. I mean, they're not that expensive to at least borrow multiple 4K cameras these days. The last one, we had huge problems because of the sound quality in the room. It was really awful, but, you know, plan ahead. So your analog perspective is not poo-pooed despite our VR. It's more, hooray, hooray, how far can we take it?
Well, yeah, I feel like what I'm maybe building out here is a blueprint for a VR space that I'd like to see. You know, and I think it would not be difficult to encode this bits and pieces, turn them into atoms and replicate it. And then once I replicate it, try and turn them into sort of separate them into hyperplanes like I was talking about, you know, where then I could fold the scroll space to say, oh, here's what I've been thinking about that's related to VR over the last 3 months, you know, or here with intersected with a hyperplane of the books I've referenced, you know, and in their proximity show both of them. Anyway.
Yeah. So when you say atoms, sound like atoms. Well, we already have one. That's enough. Already have one atom. Yeah. So,
I have to run. So it's
just a brief thing before you go. If such a thing's going to happen, and it's not going to just be a CD-ROM demo, there's got to be the infrastructure for it. That's it. We just shouldn't forget about that. Whether it's JSON or Visual Meta that's translated to JSON, I don't care. I want to hook into it with my side of the world, but it doesn't matter what the actual thing is because it can all be connected, right? I just don't want us to have a future of text and a VR experience and it's a one-off.
So I think this connects to both those ideas of atoms and CD-ROMs. I'm a bit worried that we build palaces, kind of individual palaces, knowledge palaces or experiences, big VR experiences that are very not portable, just because they are so big and so intricate and connected to the systems. So I'm really interested in the kind of, and this is what I think the iPad missed the most. It was a way of collecting a few things. You only have the share sheet where you can send individual photos or individual files one at a time. And it's really, really hard to work with a few items, a few photos, a few documents, we don't have a kind of, I talked about the plate before. In 3D, it's kind of maybe a small snow globe of things. A small collections of ideas and resources and notes that you could throw to someone, and not the full world that you have to put somewhere. Maybe it just dropped in your timeline, as Frode said, or you put it somewhere on a shelf somewhere where you can find it also, if you need that. But I suspect, and this goes back to my spatial canvases. When I worked on them, I don't want a full world where everything is placed in the memory palace. I want 1,000 small notes, or the 3D equivalents of notes that I can search for, and maybe I place a few of them in other places, but most of the notes are not valuable. They are just working material. Speaking of the power laws, they are made for the moment. It's good to have them as reference, maybe, but most of them are not valuable. I don't read my notes. 99% of my notes I don't read, but a few of them are really valuable. So I think the small units that are or that you don't have to think, where do I put them? What are they? I just throw a few things over to Alan, a few things to myself, to the archive, and then I don't do anything more with them. Yeah.
I'm going to do my best impression of Peter Wasilko. Peter, you're there, right?
Yes, I am.
How about we build HyperCard for VR?
I love it.
So is it a hypercube then, or some sort of a kind of a space, or is it still cards?
Cards. But how we flip them and interact with them and cube them will be very interesting. But I can imagine if this is our sales pitch to ourselves, it becomes a bit of an orienting principle. And there's no reason to say the cards have to be a certain size. You know, the Linnaean Society, Carl Linnaeus's cards were small. Alan's cards are freaking massive. You know, Bob Horn's cards were actually murals. There's no reason these cards can't all be shown in whatever size as a default. And then they all have metadata saying the author intends this card to be 20 foot wide.
Going a slight tangent from there back to the hyperplane. Adam had an excellent idea the other day around chord words that are sort of like words that resonate, that may have their own particular meaning to you, and they don't have to have the same meaning to anyone else. And a few days later, I came across something pretty interesting in braid theory called braid words. So braid theory, very quickly, is if you have these strings, and some of the strings overlap, it's important to capture the order in which they overlap. A overlaps over B.
Did you say braid? Like, can you spell that?
B-R-A-I-D. Yes. And so they have a syntax. There's a separate syntax. I think using Sigma for braids to show, you know, how far over, you know, which braid is overlapping another braid, etc. And then you concatenate those instructions together, and it's called a braid word, right? So a single word now captures the course of this braid over a bunch of other braids and the other braids in relation. So maybe instead of a hyper card, a hyper braid would be an interesting thought experiment where you could say, like, here's not only the thought at the time, not only the note, but how that note has traversed, or how the chord word, the random association that you have at that moment, how it relates and traverses from things that you've read, articles you've come across, conversations you've had. And that is like a braid. And it doesn't have to be an entity. It doesn't have to be a note. It's a thing that travels through time and can even, like, its association can be mutable. You know, it can over the years have a totally different association and maybe even be a different physical word. It doesn't have to be a physical word. The idea of a chord word or braid could be that it's this sort of a placeholder. It's this thread that you have in your head that just stays, right? Anyway, that's it.
Could be interesting too. I see the time machine, Apple Time Machine thing, where you have documents in time. But if you had that in VR with those braided or like ideas, you can see how long an idea is or when a note started, and revisions, not as maybe, yeah, but together with the active place where you are right now, so you can see the history of the ideas you have pulled into this current moment.
It makes
the timeline
makes you wonder. Imagine it as a perhaps a virtual sheet music.
The Beat Saber
That's right.
of note taking.
Yeah, that's provocative and interesting. And when I go through a long linear document, the thing I want to do is fold and unfold in specific places. You know, even when working on in an amazing augmented VR environment or the physical world with things around, when you're actually looking at something, you want it right in front of you, probably no larger than a 24-inch monitor or something like that. That's kind of good for foveal vision. You move your eyes more than your head. Everything outside of that should be for the finding and, you know, just very, very different experience. Yeah, so we have the last 5 minutes of attempting to sum up.
Similar to the fold and unfold, there's a concept in graphics that the minute I saw it, it bowled me over because it's such a beautiful metaphor and so similar to that. It's called seam carving. And it's an algorithm that's sort of based on, it's been around for a while, but it's based on counting the, I guess, number of, maybe you look for the sake of simplicity, lines or intersections, and where there is the fewest, that is where it is easiest to fold it. So you can compress an image without losing its proportions, or its the proportions of the objects inside. I'll see if I can find the link very quickly.
I just dropped a couple of links to some auto stereoscopic 3D tech.
Yeah,
Would
good
be
link.
interesting to run ML or LLMs on text for do this. What is fluff language, or as Frode used to call it, and automatically fold the documents at those points.
Yeah, well, of course, now that we only have 3 minutes left, you bring up something interesting. Okay, so what I want is to have into this environment index cards, let's call it that. You know, just a thing with a content and then a ton of metadata. That has to happen. And then exactly that, we set AI loose on this thing, try all kinds of things. You know, right now from ChatGPT, the most incredible technology, we just get a linear reply. It's crazy. But if we start having a linear reply, put it over there and another one over there, and we say example, counter example, now we can start playing with it like gummy. You know, how do the counter examples relate to this? You know, what's over there? We need to build a space where AI can be expressed and appreciated in a very rich way. Thank you for bringing it up, Adam.
So summary-wise, goodbye.
Sorry, internet problems. See y'all.
See you later.
Have a great week.
Oh, was that the summaries? Did you have a summary, Peter?
I like the idea of the 3D HyperCard. That could be an interesting project to work on. And we should be able to do it with web tech, so it's not dependent upon anyone's proprietary headsets.
Yeah, exactly. All right, look forward to seeing you guys in a week. Bye for now.
And I sent you my paper by email. You should have it in your hopper.
Yeah, we'll look for it. See you later. Bye. Good to see you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Adam. Bye.